Hi, guys. It's Kelly Jones, KJ from Forward Life Coaching and also Beyond My Expectations, LLC. And I'm here today with Ethan Bradley Fu, who is an intern for Beyond My Expectations this year, this 2021-2022 school year. And Ethan and I have had a great time talking about a lot of different things that excited him or interested him in working with Beyond My Expectations. And during the conversation, and we were talking about sports and just being as fit as possible to play the game, Ethan shared his story of an injury and a misdiagnosis and the process of getting to a state where he's back being a Foo Fighter, right?
Yes.
So,
I guess I can just dive in. So some backstory. I am a martial artist. I also did wrestling for a little bit of time. I've been participating in Taekwondo for just over 10 years now. Been punching and kicking my whole life. My family, me, all have done Taekwondo or some sort of martial art. And back before I had my injury, I was able to do different, I was very flexible. I was able to do kicks above the head. I was able to, almost do splits. I wasn't that flexible, but, I almost got the splits. And I was just very mobile. Yeah. And I was just very mobile, in sparring. I'd go for a lot of headshots, kicks to the head, stuff like that. And so that all changed around, I want to say the winter of 2019. So for me, it was just when I was starting wrestling. I only got to do wrestling for a few months before it really started getting bad. But I started doing wrestling and it started off very light. I would feel a little stiffer in my leg, my right hip area specifically. And I wasn't able to get my full range of motion. I wasn't able to kick like I used to. And that grew to the point where during wrestling, what we call neutral position is when you're hunched over getting ready to do a match or scrimmage, whatever it is. I would feel light but sharp pains shoot down my leg and stay condensed in my hip. And I kind of brushed it off. I didn't think it was much. I thought it was because, I wasn't used to it because, Taekwondo is an all upright sport. We're punching, we're kicking, all standing up, and wrestling's just hunched over. So I thought it was just the transition between it. But, excuse me, it started getting to the point where I wasn't able to stay in the neutral positions because it would start hurting too much. I would feel sharp, even sharper, harsher jolts of pain down my leg. It would shoot down the back of my thigh and a lot in my hip. I wasn't able to do kicks like I used to. I definitely couldn't kick high. I was doing mid-level kicks. And I couldn't do any of the stretches for Taekwondo that we normally do. For example, stretch kicks where you keep your legs straight and you kick straight up or as far up as you can. Just the basic stretches I wasn't able to do because it was becoming too painful.
Ethan, let me ask something really quickly. So in the beginning, you were able to kick your feet.
I was able to I was able to bring up my knee to my chest, straight up.
All right. And so then when you finally realized there was pain, you were like this?
For the kicks, I was probably able to bring it up to around here, but it wasn't the full range of motion. It was probably, it was at an upward angle still. So, I still had some good range of motion, but it was a very noticeable difference from what I initially had. And I'm trying to think.
Nobody said anything to you when you were going lower? I mean, did they say try harder, or did they say, you need more rest, or what were people saying, or what were you thinking that you needed to do more of?
For me, so we don't really get told do better and stuff like that because someone might be having an off day or stuff might be going on. They just might not be able to perform as well as they normally do. But what really told me that something might be going wrong is when it was starting to hurt when I started doing stretches like that. Because earlier on, it was mostly just discomfort and stiffness. And I thought that was just because I was getting into a new sport and weird things with that. But then it started turning into pain. And this is all within the time period of a month and a half. So it was pretty short notice because I don't go to class Taekwondo. I don't go to class every single day of the week because school. So I normally went to 2 or 3 classes per week. And then wrestling practice was almost every day of the week. So I did notice it a lot in wrestling, but that's why I chalked it up to, hey, it's a new sport. I might just not be used to it. But then when it started affecting me in Taekwondo and I started noticing it there, that's when I thought something might be up. So we went and like after all this, like it's a month and a half, maybe 2 months in, we went to the doctor to just get it checked out, because it was becoming painful rather than just discomfort. And that's when the first, like, I guess the like misdiagnosis came in. Was I got diagnosed with something called SI joint dysfunction, and that's more of a joint problem. And
So
the
S
tricky,
like Sam, I like ice cream.
yes, S like Sam, I like ice cream, joint dysfunction.
And what is that?
And if I remember correctly, it's shoot, it's like sacroiliac joint dysfunction, and it's basically it has to do with the joint. And I forgot what it was, but it experiences the same symptoms or some of the similar ones as what I currently am diagnosed with. I got re-diagnosed like I want to say like half a year ago from now. So was that like May 2021? And
So how long did it take them to diagnose you with the SI joint dysfunction?
so
So
SI joint dysfunction was my initial diagnosis, and that was like over a one appointment thing. Like they were asking me what was up, they were checking with my symptoms and stuff like that. So I thought I had SI joint dysfunction from I want to say like December of 2019, November 2019 to actually I guess I got re-diagnosed like a year after that. Never mind. So for about a year, I thought I had SI joint dysfunction, and um, I got re-diagnosed after because okay, so I got diagnosed with SI joint dysfunction. So I took it easy on sports, right? I didn't want to overinflame anything, so I just took it easy. I became like a spectator. I still went to the practices so I could still learn stuff by like watching, but I didn't participate because I didn't want to hurt myself. And for me, it was kind of funny timing, funny in a like ironic way, but I didn't have to worry about like being out of the sport initially because a few months after, in beginning of 2020, that's when COVID came around and everything got shut down. So the sports got shut down, like everything was being closed off. So it didn't affect me too hard initially. Because that's when schools went virtual learning. So I was staying home for a majority of it. So I didn't have any times where I could overwork it or injure it. It's just some things became harder, I guess, because for one, long hours of sitting was one of the things that really inflamed my hip and caused a lot of pain if I sat for too long, especially in uncomfortable seating. So I was shifting around a lot, and this didn't affect me too much, at home virtual learning. I wasn't going out. I wasn't like, yeah, I wasn't out and about. So it wasn't too bad at first, but yeah, I was initially diagnosed with SI joint dysfunction. I went to physical therapy and was getting physical therapy for SI joint dysfunction. So I'm not sure if that was like, I want to say it was helpful. It did help with ease some pain, but I feel like that's because piriformis syndrome, which is what I currently have, piriformis syndrome. They have very similar traits, so you might be able to treat them in the same ways. But what is it? So piriformis syndrome, the difference is that SI joint dysfunction has to do with my joints and specifically my hip joints. But piriformis syndrome has to do with a muscle, a really small muscle that's in my buttocks. And the yeah. The difference is that the SI joint dysfunction had to do with the joint like locking and pinching on things, but piriformis syndrome has to do with a muscle. And dealing with rehabilitation with a joint and a muscle are two very different things. And the main thing with my muscle issue is that it's like very tense right now. And they say it's because like I initially thought, like since Taekwondo is all upright, I've been training all those muscles are really strong. And then going into wrestling where it's all hunched over and down low, I hadn't trained those muscles.
Wow.
So yeah, just
And
something about that.
you're performing at the mindset of an expert Taekwondo person. So your expectation going into wrestling was, I got it, I got it, I got it.
Yeah. I already had my like the physical mindset of a black belt in Taekwondo, because I had been doing Taekwondo for around like 9.5 years at the time. So, I thought it would be a very easy switch. A lot of I also got into wrestling because a lot of my friends were doing it. So, I thought it would be a very fun experience. And then I ended up going in and then throwing my lower muscles out of whack, I guess. And so for piriformis syndrome, it's the piriformis muscle that pinches on my sciatic nerve, which is a nerve that runs down from my glute to my thigh and that area.
I have
So,
sciatica.
so the same, like the thing is for SI joint dysfunction and piriformis syndrome, they can both have sciatic like nerve issues. So I think that's what helped or like was one of the reasons for part of the misdiagnosis, as well as like the other symptoms like stiffness, like pain, instability, stuff like that. They're very similar. It's just it has to deal with joints rather than muscles. It's like the cause is different, but the symptoms are very similar.
Mhm.
And
So how did they go from figuring out it was SI joint to piriformis? What
so
happened?
if I remember correctly, I think as it got worse, because I'm not doing any stretches or anything anymore. I'm not doing physical therapy. It's all closed off because of COVID. I didn't do any home stretches or anything. I didn't know what to do for home stretches, especially if it's a joint issue. There's not really too much I could have done. But I got re-diagnosed at the same place, but the symptoms had become more clear because when I initially got diagnosed, it was more like they went through the same process. It was like, so what hurts? Like, what are you feeling? And stuff like that. But the second time I went, it was more defined. Like things were like I dealt with them for longer, so I knew more about like what type of pain I was feeling when it was agitated, stuff like that. And one of the bigger thing, I think it was sitting down for extended periods of time was a specific question I got asked. They were like, okay, so when is it like more inflamed? And they guessed sitting down for longer periods of time, and I guess that's more characteristic of piriformis syndrome. And then he did the doctor I visited did a specific like movement where I was lying down, I had my leg up, and then I crossed my other leg on top of it, and then he bent my legs up towards me, and that shot a lot of pain. And that was like a characteristic I
Of
want to say, I don't,
piriformis.
yeah, like a stretcher, just some like an agitator, that's the word, like an irritator of piriformis syndrome. So he knew off of that it was most likely piriformis syndrome, uh especially since I forgot what type of, I did some sort of like x-ray or scan, and it wasn't anything, it didn't seem like it had anything to do with bones directly. So he was able to deduce that it was most likely piriformis syndrome and a muscle issue. And thankfully for piriformis syndrome, there's a lot of online videos on YouTube and stuff for stretches that I can do.
Mhm.
So I've been looking into those. Those have been helping. It's doing better than it like at its worst. It's better than that point. So I'm past the rough of it so far, but still dealing with it. I still haven't been able to participate or perform to my fullest like I did before my injury, but I'm definitely trying to work my way back to it.
Wow. Wow. How many doctors did it take to do the first one, the SI diagnosis? It was one doctor?
Yeah, it was just one doctor, and then the second re-diagnosis was just one doctor as well.
But it was one doctor who had spent time with you, extensive amount of time with you.
For the re-diagnosis,
Uh-huh.
no, we didn't even spend like extensive amounts of time together. It's just that I think it was more that I had more knowledge of what I was dealing with, and maybe the doctor also like had more experience dealing with like certain things, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So it was a specialist?
I think it was. I don't remember 100%, but it definitely wasn't was a GD, a general doctor. It was someone who specialized in, I forgot what it exactly was, but it had something to do with like legs and hips.
Wow. Maybe orthotics or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, one of the challenges for a lot of people is the inverse care law, and also secondary communication, primary and secondary communication. So sometimes what's said to one clinician is not transferred properly to the next clinician, and the interpretation of the two can lead to more challenges with diagnosing. But the bottom line is It all relates to communication, being able to effectively understand your body, effectively understand the changes in your body, and the clinician or the physician understanding exactly what you're saying. Because one thing is, I have this little bar that I showed several students, and I have different characters on there. And one is like James Evans from Good Times, and one's Mary Poppins, and who else do I have on there? The Grinch, and etc. And the thing
Mhm.
is, all three, if they went to the doctors, they would probably say a different level of pain for the same exact situation.
Mhm.
So when you look at that pain scale of 0 to 10, and how much does the pain except it hurt, because the doctor doesn't understand exactly how much your pain hurts, because their measurement of pain threshold may be different from yours also. Or pain threshold, pain tolerance might be different from yours. That level of communication sometimes makes the difference in them being able to pinpoint exactly where the challenge is. But
Mhm.
spending more time with the clinician and helping them to get to know you and understand, how your body moves and the things that are, you're good at, and etc. Then they're able to pinpoint and say, oh, wow, okay, yeah, this is painful. Or, oh, yeah, okay, they're not stretching as far as they could. Or, do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, they're
That
able
is
to better, like, with more personal experience with the patient, they're able to determine like what's more uncharacteristic, why something is affecting them more than it should, or yeah, more than other things.
So Ethan, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a second name. I know you're the Foo Fighter, but I'm also giving you the interpreter because you always interpret things for us. So that is your second title, the nickname, the interpreter.
Thank you.
Exactly. Exactly. The more time, I mean, just think about it. There's certain things that you do that your parents understand because they know you better than, let's say,
Mhm.
your teacher or somebody else. So that
Right.
relationship is very, very key. I was reading that the average doctor sees somewhere between 20 to 23 patients a day, allowing 15 minutes per call. And if they were to effectively do their job addressing acute, chronic, and preventative care, that it would take them approximately 21.7 hours per day to take care of the patients that they take care of in 8 hours. So you think about it, when you go into a doctor's office, they don't have a whole lot of time to try and figure out things. They need to get it and keep going and get it and keep going. So the more prepared we are, and the more we understand our body, and the more insight, objective and subjective insight we have as to what's going on, the better we can equip the doctor to make the right diagnosis.
One difference that actually brings up that I noticed now is that the first time I got diagnosed, it wasn't as like, it was more inquisitive. They're asking me what hurts, like things
On
that have
that pain
changed, stuff
scale,
like
zero
that.
to 10.
And then the second doctor, he, like I said, gave me that like one stretch where I put my legs up and he pushed them in. He I guess did one certain stretch that was more characteristic for a certain like disorder or diagnosis. So like that's one difference that is shown there. Like it's like the difference between just asking someone how they're feeling compared to actually being able to act upon it and like I guess know what you're dealing with.
Right, right. And even in acting how they're feeling, right? So like
Mhm.
let's say your toe, let's say you say your toe hurts to, let's say, like Mary Poppins, right? And she's gonna be like, oh well, just put a spoonful of sugar with it, and da, 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 and she'll like whatever, right? And try to
Mhm.
find you something to do like that. But let's say you and she'll want to correct it because she's very solution oriented, right? And let's say you say that to, like, James Evans from Good Times, he'd be like, oh, get up and stop playing games, right? So you don't know, or even if you do it to like somebody, in the military who's like basic training and like hardcore, so, oh, come on, get up and stop playing games, or a football coach or whatever. So you don't know your frame of reference of your physician, right?
Mhm.
Because even though we try to be, and I'm not a physician, but I'm saying even though people try to be, a vanilla sheet, like they try to not have bring their own bias in there, sometimes we do bring in our own frame of reference. So if you're a
Right.
doctor and you're seeing all these patients per day, it doesn't mean that you're going to be absolutely perfect and always be neutral. Sometimes some things may fall into play because you've got 15 minutes, the clock is ticking, you got 15 minutes and you got to keep going. So
Right.
it's, understanding your language, understanding your physician, and there's a whole lot of parameters that come into it that lead to, are you ready for this?
Mhm.
There are over 12 million misdiagnoses per year, 12 million misdiagnoses annually. 40 to 80,000 of those misdiagnoses actually lead to death. They're fatal. So part of that, once again, like I said, is just in the communication. As I mentioned, in the inverse care law, and primary, secondary clinicians, making sure that what I'm communicating to you is effectively being communicated to the next person and the next person and the next person on my care team. And there's gaps. So if you were to give advice to anybody today who's facing a condition that could be like they're not getting better and it could be a misdiagnosis, what would you say to them to help them go back and get a second opinion, or just make sure that they're moving along on the right track?
So I'd say initially, like, even if you haven't been diagnosed with anything yet, if you're an athlete or if you're just someone and you've noticed that certain things that you're used to doing are becoming like increasingly harder, whether it's like stiffness, pain, stuff like that, you should get it checked out by a professional. Make sure that everything is running properly, because you never know what could happen. Because even if you're like a top D1 tier athlete, there could be something that was thrown out of whack for some obscure reason, and it's good to always get it checked out and seconded by a professional to make sure like that everything's in working order, or to find out if something isn't. But if you are dealing with something like a disorder or diagnosis and it isn't getting better, and one thing that I'd recommend, if you're not already, I'd recommend like making sure you're doing whatever the doctor recommended, like stretches, taking whatever you need, whatever is being recommended to you. Make sure you keep up with it, because although it may seem small or like there's not much of a difference in the short term, in the long term it definitely adds up. Like doing those stretches every day will add up. Even doing those small sets of like 3 stretches every day, it adds up, especially in the long term. That's one thing I wish I did earlier on, was kept up with stretches, kept up with the recommendations on what I should do. And then if those aren't making a difference, then I would recommend, I guess, getting it rechecked out. Maybe if you didn't go for a specialist, like let's say your arm's hurting, if you didn't go to a specialist for that, you just went to a general doctor, or maybe your diagnosis, like it changed, like you were initially feeling pain in like your whole arm, but then it's more concentrated in like your elbow, get it checked out for that specifically. Just going to get a more specific checkout will most likely lead to like some sort of better advice from the professional who can help you recover.
Excellent. And how long would you say the wait should be if you're not getting better? How long was the wait for you?
That's very tricky, because it depends on it depends on how bad it is. Because for me, I didn't go back until it was like noticeably worse. And for me, it was also tricky because, COVID was happening. So things were shut down. So I had to wait until things started opening up again. But it's hard to gauge when someone should go back. Like, I'm not sure.
When do you wish you would have gone back? Like if you could have done it, if you could do it all over again. Yeah.
See,
I can't ask you because you're not a
back.
clinician, but I'm just saying, if you were to do it all over again,
I wish I would have gone back earlier, like months earlier. Because for me, mine was a very difficult situation. Because for me, I couldn't go back until COVID, or like COVID regulations changed and everything opened up again. Because I tried to go back as soon as I could after everything opened up. But for me, I wish I could have gone back like months earlier just to get it rechecked out.
So having that constant insight, progress tracking, like to say, like, if you could objectively measure how you're doing today and then how you're doing 3 months later, or 3 weeks later, if you could objectively measure whether or not you're getting better or getting worse or staying the same, it would probably help.
Right. Yeah. Just going, I don't know. I'd recommend just going like as soon as you can. Like if you don't think it's going better, just getting there as soon as you can. Just even if it's just off of like it feels a little worse, like I don't know. I think just getting it rechecked out, especially if you're in the position to, it's just a good idea.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. Just one quick thing. Was it emotionally draining to go through that process?
I'd say initially it wasn't, but especially after things have opened up and I've been, like had the opportunity to go back and stuff, it's been a lot more emotionally draining. Because initially, I wasn't too worried about it because COVID happened. I was stuck home anyways. But once things opened up, I'm able to go back to classes. I'm a co-captain of my demo team at Taekwondo. So now that I'm in that leadership position again, it has become a lot more emotionally draining because I definitely can't perform as well as I used to. And I'm just like, the biggest thing that lingers in my mind is if I ever will be able to perform as well as I used to.
Yeah. Because before, probably during COVID, you couldn't compare yourself to anyone.
Mhm.
And now that we're out of COVID, now you have that opportunity to compare.
Yeah, now I realize like how much I've like regressed compared to what I used to be able to do.
Yeah. And so what are they thinking? Can they give you different stretches and different things to
Yes, thankfully, since it's a tense muscle issue, hopefully just by doing stretches and stuff. And I think we were gonna, I think we were thinking about going back to physical therapy if that would help. But physical therapy and stretches. And thankfully, there are a lot of like YouTube videos, even with stretches for my condition. So
right.
definitely looking at stretches.
And luckily you caught it early, because
Right.
think of how many people wait, like,
Yeah. Some
a
people wait
year.
years.
Yeah, because of the
Yeah, and it can.
bravado, and like, like, I'm not going to the doctors or whatever, but
Mhm.
yeah, luckily you're on the road to recovery. So you are still doing Taekwondo things and you still are able to perform as a black belt,
Correct. Yes.
just
Just
not
not
a,
at the same level that I used to be able to.
so you still are a Foo Fighter.
Of course. Yeah. Always. Always. That's never going to change.
Just checking. Ethan, is there anything else you'd like to share with people with regards to, just once again, well, I was really looking at pain tolerance, pain threshold, and misdiagnosis, like how sometimes ailments are misdiagnosed because you have a higher pain tolerance, and you miss the fact that, oh my God, I'm nearing, or I'm beyond my pain
Mhm.
threshold.
Yeah. So, I guess anytime you feel like any types of pains, if you're in the position to see a professional or like a physician, a doctor, whoever it is, I'd recommend it. I think that's always good because for mine, I know that part of my misdiagnosis was probably due to me, the pain either not being like as severe as it was, or the like the pain scale we were talking about. Like I wasn't feeling as much pain, but maybe because I'm used to sparring and fighting in Taekwondo that I built up some sort of pain tolerance or resistance. So I downplayed it a little more than I should have, something like that. So I think in the end, just making sure, getting it checked out, and if like it changes, it gets worse, it maybe if it gets better, going and seeing a professional, getting it rechecked out, stuff like that.
Awesome, guys. You see why Ethan is just so doggone cool. He's so cool. So, Ethan, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for sharing and being so transparent about your journey. And just thank you for being an amazing intern.
Thank you.
All right. All right, guys. Once again, it's Kelly KJ Jones from Forward Life Coaching, Beyond My Expectations LLC, just talking about, once again, pain threshold, pain tolerance, and misdiagnosis, and just the journey to recovery. So thank you again for everything, Ethan.
Thank you.